Well, welcome back to the third instalment of our Bible study on the book of Ruth. If you are not a member of St Andrew's congregation, it's lovely to have you with us. And if you are, then that is fantastic. Just a reminder that this is just a sort of a summary, really, of the sessions, which cover a lot more ground and have lots more fantastic discussion. But hopefully this will help you with some sort of, as it were, audio and visual notes on the session. So we are going into chapter 2, and I'm just lining up my Bible in front of me here. I am largely using the NRSV, which is my favourite. Okay, so because we're getting into each sort of verse and breaking it down, I'm going to read them as we go along. Now, Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a prominent rich man of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. So, we're sent right back to the beginning of the story, to the name Elimelech. God is king, and this is very good news, I think. Really, this would make our ears prick up very much, that there are kinsmen of Elimelech around, that his family are still in the area. We might be thinking of the possibilities of levirate marriage, or of Goel, kinsman redeemers, and all that sort of thing, where this may be of help. Also, of course, that Elimelech's sort of tribe, if you like, are rich and powerful, and that feeds back into what we gleaned from the beginning of the book, where we are told that they are Ephrathites, and we imagine they are quite a well-to-do family. Of course, we don't know the nature of the relationship yet between this person and Elimelech, and indeed how that would connect exactly with Naomi, and therefore Ruth as well. Just a reminder that Boaz means strength. So again, this should bode well. A wealthy man, perhaps even a warrior of some sort, a mighty man, someone we might sort of call a knight or something, someone with a certain influence and integrity in the community, possibly an ex-warrior, certainly a solid citizen, and a powerful landowner. And interestingly, of course, Boaz is one of the names of the pillars in the Temple of Solomon. So that sort of, strength as if, sort of a building block of the Davidic line, that from David, David was sort of a son of strength, if you like. Okay, so we know that he's a relative of Elimelech, therefore Naomi, but doesn't appear that Naomi has made any plans for Ruth to meet him. It's just for us to know via the narrator. So we go on. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain, behind someone in whose sight I may find favour." She said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she went. She came and gleaned in the field behind the reapers. So this chapter gives us a beautiful glimpse of the life of the poor in ancient Palestine, of kind of agricultural work and harvest time and all that sort of thing, and the way the laws play out. So Ruth may be an alien and all of this, but she's obviously aware of gleaning as a right for widows, because she suggests that she might go out and glean. And gleaning, of course, enabled the poor to get some food sort of immediately. That was, one of the real advantages of this law, this right. even though the harvest isn't even completely gathered yet, and they've only just arrived, they can get some food straight away. Gleaning is not dependent on the whim of landowners. It's a law. It is a right. And yet, she also sort of talks of this hope that she might find favour in the sight of someone. So we should also be thinking metaphorically that this is harvest time, that this is a time of sort of new beginnings and growth and being gathered in. And that is what she is seeking for her and for Naomi as well. She wants herself and Naomi to be gleaned, as it were, to be gathered, even though they find themselves on the very sidelines of society. And that's important because they are in a sort of an uncomfortable position in ancient society as a family without the immediate protection of a husband. So the rules like gleaning allow them access to land and access to some sort of legal protection. So we may also be starting to sort of think about other rules like Redeemer rules and things like that. Makes sense that Ruth offers to go out and find food. She is the younger and we'd assume the more able-bodied. So we go on. As it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Just then Boaz came from Bethlehem. He said to the reapers, "The Lord be with you." They answered, "The Lord bless you." Then Boaz said to his servant, who was in charge of the reapers, "To whom does this young woman belong?" The servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, "She is the Moabite who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers." So she came, and she has been on her feet from early this morning until now, without resting even for a moment. A really important verse in Ruth, and one that has led to much discussion, is, of course, this one that as it happened, she came to the part of the field belonging to Boaz. So the narrator is certainly suggesting that this is not sort of Naomi isn't sort of managing all of this, and it's probably more our modern sort of bias and stereotyping, sort of think that the mother-in-law must be manoeuvring everything into position and sort of planning and scheming the whole thing. No, as it happened, it was chance, if you like. But of course, this isn't a book about chance. It's a book about God and God's relationship with his people. So this is probably the clearest sign in the book of God's providence working all the time, constantly, unseen, often, and even in the most everyday, in the most mundane, in the most simple of things, God's hand is at work. So there they are. With she's made contact with Boaz. Strength. She's found strength. Strength from the house of bread from Bethlehem. It's all looking much better. And he's clearly a religious man and a faithful man, and one that recognises God's hand in his life and in the blessings of the world, because he addresses his servants, "The Lord be with you," and they answer, "The Lord bless you." So she's found faithful people as well to be among, and a faithful, strong person to, as it were, sort of reap behind. So Boaz obviously assumes she is a servant of some kind. Who does she belong to? Either that, or he's asking which male's household she belongs to. This may give us a clue as to what she looks like, and the sort of the poverty that her and Naomi may have slipped into. That she may be wearing, fairly sort of peasant-like clothes or whatever. But he may also be inquiring because if she doesn't belong to anyone particular, he has a household that might gather her up. So it's maybe speculative. And the servant makes it very clear that she is a Moabite who came from the country of Moab. It's said twice, really, really important in the story that she's a Moabite. It's not incidental. We are to reflect on the fact that she is a foreigner and specifically a Moabite, almost the sort of the historic enemy of the people of Israel. And here she is among them, an alien in a foreign land. And she's obviously asked, even though it's a right, she's a woman who is polite and dignified and humble. So she asks if she's able to glean and gather. And when she did, she worked like a trooper. So when we put all of this together and we find that Boaz has already heard about this woman Ruth and the part she's played with her mother-in-law Naomi, we have a woman who is persistent, hard-working. She has sworn loyalty to her Israelite mother-in-law. She's humbly asked to glean. She's a hard-working woman, only taking a short break. She's made a very favourable impression indeed. So, verse 8, we go on. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Now listen, my daughter. Do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped, and follow behind them. I have ordered the young men not to bother you. If you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn." The biggest thing here surely is my daughter, he calls her. That may point to a disparity of ages, but most importantly, surely it is a sign of affection and acceptance. As I said, it may be speculative when he asks, who does she belong to? We already have this sense that he's taking her under his wing. Don't go to glean in another field or leave this one. Stick with me. Keep close to my young women. She's almost, part of his group, his workforce, his household, as it were. She's being let right in there. And then it turns out he has personally had a word with the young men not to bother her. We may think this is a sexual thing, that they may harass her, that she may be sort of double jeopardy, not only a woman on her own, but also a foreign woman and a Moabite woman who could be considered sort of sexually promiscuous anyway, and therefore sort of fair game. But I don't think we necessarily have to read it like that. It may just be that there was sometimes tension between those who were gleaning and the people that were officially engaged in the harvest. That they'd be sort of shooed away and that sort of thing, or that she would just be vulnerable to verbal abuse as a Moabite woman. Either way, whatever it is, we suddenly realise in Boaz's words how vulnerable she is and what a position she has put herself in because of the love of her mother-in-law, that wonderful hesed, that loving kindness and loyalty to her mother-in-law. She's allowed herself sacrificially to be put in this vulnerable position and of hard work as well. So he says to the young men personally, this means a lot to him, don't bother her. And in fact, more than that, he does her quite a favour here. As if you get thirsty, go and drink what the men have drawn. So, she's obviously putting in lots of effort herself, physical effort into gleaning, and he doesn't want her to waste any unnecessarily. Take what's already on offer, that sort of thing. But also not to lose valuable time as well. There's only so much time in the day, so there we go. We might also remember that the name Ruth could mean friendship, but it could also mean something about an abundance of water or being a water giver. And here we see a reversal of that she, the water giver, is, or the one abundant in water, is now being offered water in return. There's a nice sort of a symmetry there. And one last thing to mention is that, of course, we've seen there are women here and there are men here working. And that's not surprising. The harvest, it had to be a community event. Everyone had to be involved because there was a sense of urgency to it so that the crop did not spoil or be, eaten by pests or whatever, that sort of thing. So we think that probably the men were doing the reaping and the women were probably sort of tying bundles and gathering and that sort of thing. We go on. Which verse are we on now? Oh yeah, verse 10. Is that right? Yes. Then she fell prostrate with her face to the ground and said to him, "Why have I found favour in your sight, that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Then she said, "May I continue to find favour in your sight, my lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I am not one of your servants." So Ruth prostrates herself. This is a sign of humility and gratitude. He didn't have to do these things for her, just as Ruth did not have to do the things she has done for Naomi. But she wants to know what we want to know as well. Why have I found favour in your sight? Why has Ruth found this favour in the sight of Boaz? And the answer, in short, brings us back to that word hesed, that loving kindness and loyalty, which in the last chapter Naomi says that her daughters-in-law have shown to her, and therefore she prays that that may be found for them. Here Boaz talks of the fact that Ruth has shown this great hesed to her mother-in-law Naomi, and so now he is going to show that hesed in return. Hesed, of course, importantly, is sort of one of the attributes of God, that it is God who is really the perfect example of loving kindness and loyalty in his covenantal relationship with the people of Israel. So Ruth has shown, sort of revealed that divine attribute in the world, and so Boaz echoes that. He mirrors that back as well. So they are, as it were, both of them acting in a godlike way. And he also describes her in terms which remind us of Abraham's call. For example, you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. And we might also think about Rebecca as well, Isaac's, who becomes Isaac's wife, when his servant goes out to find someone who is a person of faith and meets Rebecca, and she's asked to return with the servant to Isaac. Will you go with this man? And she says, I will. Again, to a land that she does not know, to leave father and mother and that sort of thing. So this is what the patriarchs and matriarchs of the past have done as a great sacrificial act and in following sort of God's call. And here Ruth is doing the same. And so she is accepting as her own God, the God of Israel, Yahweh, and her actions back that up, that she's following that journey of faith, which the people before her have also done. She walks in the footsteps of Abraham's and Rebecca's and those sort of people, and that is recognized to Boaz. That's very, very important indeed. He sees her as part of the story of the family of God. And so he asks his blessing upon her. Essentially, he invokes again God to give Hesed to Ruth. And of course, his prayer is going to be answered first and foremost by himself. He will be the very person who will enact this Hesed on behalf of God, who will actually gather her under his wing in the way that God gathers people under his wings, under God's wings. And this is a recognition that God is one who loves and is loyal and who protects those who come to him. She is really sort of recognized as a member of the Israelite community in Bethlehem, despite being a Moabitess from Moab. Let's go on. At mealtime. Yes, at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here and eat some of this bread and dip your morsel in the sour wine. So she sat beside the reapers, and he heaped up for her some parched grain. She ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, let her glean even among the standing sheaves, and do not reproach her. You must also pull out some handfuls for her from the bundles, and leave them for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. She's being invited even further into the household. It doesn't get much more sort of intimate, accepting, and as a sign of hospitality than letting someone come and eat with you and your people. And in fact, even more than that, to dip your morsel in as it were, the same bowl. And for us Christians, that is almost certainly going to ring bells of, Judas at the Last Supper, and Jesus sort of saying, even a friend as you, even one that is so close to me that they dip their bread in the same bowl as me, even you may betray me. So this is the fact that she's there eating with them, dipping her morsel in the sour wine with them, shows that she's right in there. She's been really accepted. She sat beside the reapers. Right, she's someone in the Bible study group suggested that this is unusual because the reapers, we assume, are the men, and she's even with them, or she's been placed almost in a higher tier than you would expect. Someone who's female and new and a foreigner and all of that. There she is with the men who actually do the reaping, and she's not just been given some parched grain, which may not sound appetizing to us, but is actually, this is the fresh crop that's just been baked. But it's heaped up for her. This is sort of overwhelming hospitality. And she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. Again, this will remind us of all kinds of images that Jesus gives of abundant love, of things overflowing and there being food left, like the feeding of the 5,000. And again, Boaz is reminding his young men to help her, to assist her, to not be, difficult or to make her work difficult. In fact, she's being allowed to work among them, not just follow on behind. This goes well beyond the duty of law, and that they should pull some bundles. Handfuls from the bundles themselves, and sort of leave them for her to clean, just to make it even easier. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gathered, and it was about an ephah of barley. She picked it up and came into the town, and her mother-in-law saw how much she had gleaned. Then she took out and gave her what was left over after she herself had been satisfied. It's important to say that an ephah is probably around 4 gallons. That is a huge amount. When she's doing this beating out, this is to remove this is to separate the grain from the husk or whatever, and like what happens on the threshing floor, sort of a thing. So it just leaves you with the pure grain. And she's certainly got a huge amount. She's worked all the way till evening. So despite this huge generosity, it hasn't made her any less grateful or hard-working. She's continued to be a real trooper, worked all the way through the day. And she has returned immediately after work to her mother-in-law, who is still who she has clung to and who she is doing all this for, really, at the moment. And there's plenty for both of them. Her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today, and where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The name of the man with whom I worked today is Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "The man is a relative of ours, one of our nearest kin." Then Ruth the Moabite said, "He even said to me, 'Stay close by my servants until they have finished all my harvest.'" Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, It's better, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, otherwise you might be bothered in another field. So she stayed close to the young women of Boaz, gleaning until the end of the barley and wheat harvests, and she lived with her mother-in-law. There's an awful lot in that, isn't there? So she is delighted, Naomi, to hear that she has found a relative in her gleaning, and obviously this relative has taken kindly to her because she's returned with absolutely tons of grain. It's been a very, very good day's gleaning indeed. And so there is this sort of prayer, this blessing that importantly mentions not just the living but the dead. If you remember in previous sessions, we talked about the fact that a lot of these laws, the levirate marriage or goels and that sort of thing, were as much about giving honour to the dead as they were to the living, or protecting the living. That in a way you do honour to the deceased by continuing their family line, by holding on or redeeming their property and keeping that going as well. That a brother would take on, would have a union with a deceased brother's widow, such that they might have children, and the first child would be considered a son of the deceased man. So here, the people who God is showing kindness to, or is not forsaking, maybe Killian, that may be Ruth's husband, but more likely we are talking about Elimelech again, right back to the beginning. And that may be surprising, because Elimelech leaves Bethlehem when there is a time of famine and heads to Moab, which we would consider a very poor choice, and one that would result in God's wrath. And indeed, Elimelech dies, and then his sons die. So, has he been punished, but he is also forgiven? Blessed is he who is forgiven. And that must be an incredibly sort of a comforting thought to a widow like Naomi, whose mindset is in that place that still considers the relationship of God and her deceased husband, and how that might be now. So then Ruth slightly misquotes Boaz, and sort of says, he sort of said, go out stick close to my servants. And of course Boaz had said, really just stick close to the women, more to the point. But whether that shows some naivety on the part of Ruth, or that perhaps Ruth is still thinking of maybe hitching up with one of the other male servants, and hasn't thought of Boaz as even a possibility at this point. That's possible. Either way, Naomi is more aware of the situation. She shows her experience and just reminds her, I think it's better if you stick with the young women, then you won't be bothered. And maybe also Naomi is thinking, well, I don't want Ruth to be bothered by the other men, because there may be a chance here with Boaz. And of course Ruth obeys, because she is faithful to Naomi. She does stay close to the young women of Boaz, and even though she's very much part of their world now, she's been welcomed in, she eats with them, she's part of almost their social circle, she still returns and lives with her mother-in-law because she is faithful to her. A last thing in this section that I think is really important to highlight is that she has been told to cleave to the young women of Boaz's households, his servants. She has cleaved to Naomi. It looks like she's going to sort of cleave to Boaz and his people. And that word, which we first find in the story of Adam and Eve, where the man and woman they cleave to one another. The language of sort of marriage or individual sort of love and loyalty in Genesis is now turning into the language of cultural identity, of ethnic relations. Everything is sort of getting bigger, and we see that in the Old Testament, particularly in Genesis, and that it sort of starts. We start small and individual, and things gradually get bigger. The geography gets bigger, and the relationships get bigger, and things start to apply to groups and larger places than they do to specifics. So these words and actions of Boaz must have been such an extraordinary tonic to Ruth, who found herself vulnerable as an alien and a widow in a foreign land, that she had found strength and hospitality and hesed in the form of Boaz. So I ended the last Bible study group by asking the people there if they had ever moved to another place or anything like that, and who had been their Boaz in that situation. Who had they found they could cling on to, or who had gathered them under their wings, taken them in and shown them the ropes and stuck by them. So maybe that is a question that you can consider until our next session. Thank you very much for listening.